Well, I said last week I was going to do it, so how about the Astros? It was very disappointing last Wednesday night. I must admit, incredibly disappointing, but I was thinking about it. The last 3 years we played so well. I'm proud of our players and who they are. I think they're great quality people. And it could be worse because you could be like I used to be, and that is you could be a Rangers fan, right? Well, good morning on this Time Change Sunday. Time Change Sunday can always be a little weird because you're early or late and people's schedules are thrown off, but I'm grateful that you're here. There's an old story about a country church that was kind of out in the middle of nowhere, and they didn't even have a foyer. If you've ever seen one of those kind of churches, it just came straight from the outside into the church. And on this particular day, as they were getting ready to go to church and people were coming in, there was a little dog that kept running in the door. Every time they'd open the door, somebody'd come in, here comes a little dog running into church service. Kids thought it was hilarious. It was annoying to the ushers. And so they fought this dog, all morning long until finally about 11 o'clock, the music started. Everybody was inside. The dog was outside like it was supposed to be. And so everything was fine. Well, about 10 minutes after the service had started into the music, a couple that were visiting the church, they came in about 10 minutes late, and the woman opened the door, and as she started to come in, of course, here comes that little dog, starts running into the church service, and one of the ushers who was sitting on the back row, he was frustrated, he jumped up, he ran back to the door and kicked at that dog. He missed the dog, but he kicked the lady in the leg. She grimaced in pain, and she said, "I'm sorry we're late, but we're new here." So if you're new here and you're visiting with us, I'm glad that you're here. We'll try not to do that to you this morning, but I'm going to be over in the Connection Center after the service is over. I hope I get a chance to meet you. It wouldn't just be okay with me. I would very much like to have that opportunity. So please come by. I don't want to talk to you about being late this morning or early, but I do want to talk to you about time. Time is such a fascinating subject. It's a mystery, really. What is time? Augustine, the early church father in the church, said, if somebody asks me what time it is, I know. But if somebody asks me to explain time, I know not. Philosophers argue that time really isn't even real. After all, the future is not here, the past is gone, and the present is so fleeting that you can't examine it. Philosophers instinctively know what we seem to know, philosophers and all of us, is that about time there just isn't enough of it, which I think is the reason we have such a fascination with trying to measure it. Stonehenge apparently was actually a device which was used to attempt to measure time. And throughout history we've had water clocks and sundials and hourglasses and then mechanical clocks. And today we measure time with absolutely incredible accuracy. At the Naval Observatory in Washington, there are 28 atomic clocks that measure time so accurately that they're only off a second or two every 100,000 years. They achieve this by dividing 1 second into 9 billion parts, based on the vibrations of cesium-133, which is 9 billion vibes per second. Psychologists speak of psychological time. Einstein apparently was giving a lecture one day, and he said if a man is sitting with a pretty girl on his lap, a second or an hour only seems like a second. But you take that same guy and you put him on a hot stove, and a second seems like an hour. Well, some smart aleck in class said, well, what happens if you have a man with a pretty girl in his lap and you sit him on a hot stove? Well, I don't know the answer to that. Several years ago, I asked a senior adult what time it was, and they said, who cares? I don't carry a watch anymore. And I remember thinking, that must be wonderful to live your life like it's one great vacation all of the time. That would be awesome. But I can't live that way. Because I have places to go and I have appointments I have to make, and I have to know what time it is. But I do have to admit, there's part of me that wishes I could be like that senior adult that just threw away their watch. If I could measure time the way it used to be measured, not by second to second or appointment to appointment, but rather by sunrise to sundown, by season to season. It's possible, as the old saying goes, to get so fixated on the trees that we miss the forest. It's also really possible to get so fixated on what time the clock says it is, minute by minute, that we misunderstand what time it really is. For instance, one day I was at home and I was getting ready for my next appointment at church. Things had been really busy, and I said to my wife, "What time is it?" And Nancy said, "It's time for you to start spending more time with your daughters and with your wife. That's what time it is. It's time for you to start caring as much about what goes on at home as you do with what goes on in the church. That's what time it is." Now, was she missing the point of the question, or was I missing the point? What time is it? Don't look at your watch. What time is it? A poet once wrote that people at 40 years of age close doors more softly. You do understand that, don't you? I mean, 40-year-olds don't like closing a door because they might need that door open sometime along the line somewhere. Don't burn your bridges. Keep your options open. You never know when you might need to go back that same way again. When you're 40 and you're trying to climb the ladder of success and trying to prove yourself, you close doors more softly. Being too decisive is not safe. I don't know if you know it or not, but the word decisive is from a Latin word that means to cut off or to sever, which is one reason we have a really hard time making decisions. Decision is such a harsh, such a final word. Better to discuss, better to defer, better to refer to a committee for further options. I mean, why go on record with making a decision? Why cut off all of our other options? That, my friend, is risky, scary business. And one of the great curses of younger people is their unwillingness to decide. And this is especially true concerning Jesus. You know, one day I might decide. One day I might commit my life to Christ. One day I might make that decision to get serious about my relationship with God. One day I might follow Him and accept that call to ministry, but not now. Got to keep those options open. 40-year-olds close doors more softly, says the poet. Not senior adults. Man, they slam the door if they want to. You ever been around that kind of senior adult? There's an old story about a senior adult woman who's driving her old Cadillac around, and she was driving trying to find a parking spot where there weren't many parking spots available, and she was looking, she saw one, she slowly started making her way before it, to it, and there was a young man in a sports car. He just zipped his car in right in front of her. I mean, took her parking spot. She was so angry. He jumped out of the car and he said, "That old lady is what happens when you're young and quick." She looked at him, just kind of smiled, floored it, just plowed in the side of his sports car, wiping it out. He said, "What are you doing?" She said, "That, young man, is what happens when you're old and rich." Yeah. Hey, the earlier service laughed a lot louder than you did. I promise you. Senior adults, they live with this freedom that younger people often don't have. And I don't mean they're insensitive or uncaring. I do mean that most senior adults have an awareness of what's really important and what isn't. There's something real and authentic about older age. Why do you think that is? You think it's possible that they really know what time it is? What time is it? Stop looking at your phone. Did you know there are two major philosophies concerning time? To the Greek mindset, time and history are seen as a big circle. There's no beginning to the world. There's no end. Everything is cyclical. Everything comes back around. To the Greek mind, there's always a tomorrow. There's no hurry to make a decision. I mean, why bother? Because if you miss something, you don't need to be concerned about it. It will come back around. There'll be another opportunity. There will be another chance. And truth be told, we think a lot like the Greeks concerning time, don't we? Even in the church, there's no hurry to make a decision. Even if we make a wrong decision, if we go down a wrong path, there's no reason to worry about it. No, don't get upset. There's always tomorrow. You'll always get another chance. There's always another opportunity. Man, we love to tell that story in Luke 15 about the young man. I do. Young man, you remember, he's getting restless at home. He went to his father and said, I'm kind of sick and tired of just doing what you've told me to do and living your life, and I want my inheritance now. And in that culture, it was very much like saying that you wish your father was dead. And he wanted his inheritance. He wanted to live his own life. Surprisingly, the father gave him the money. And you remember, he went to the far country. He was looking for a place that was so far it would be out from under his father's influence. The thing he came to recognize is there was no place in the world that was going to be that far. And it says in the scripture that he squandered, he wasted, he blew it. He squandered his wealth in wild living. He thought he was going to have the time of his life. He found out that it really wasn't that great as he was standing up to his ankles in pig slop, eating the pods that the pigs were eating, trying to. It says he came to his senses. What that means is he just recognized he'd been wrong. He'd messed up. He'd blown it. And with a newfound humility, he turned and he began to walk home, wondering how he would be received. And if you know the story, you remember that while he was still a long way off, the father saw him. With his head down, his boy, the father ran to him. He threw his arms around him. He began to hug him and kiss him. He gave him the signet ring, which was like giving him the credit card again. He put sandals on his feet. His son was home. They killed the fattened calf. And all is forgiven. It's wonderful. There was still time. There was a second chance. How wonderful. Matthew tells the story about a man who goes out at dawn, and you remember he hires some workers. He says, if you'll work for me this 12-hour day, I'll pay you what's right. And so they got started working. 3 or 4 hours later, another group of men came, and the master, the owner of the farm, said to them, if you'll come work for me, I'll pay you what's fair. So they went to work. There was still some other that came later, and the master said to them, if you'll work on my farm, then I'll give you what's right. Even to the last hour, there was 1 hour left of work, and he said to them, if you'll come work for me, I'll pay you what's fair. And so they did. At the end of the day, it's time to settle up, and all the workers come together. And you remember, the master gives them all the same amount. Like he pays the guys that worked 12 hours the same as the people, or that worked 1 hour, the same as the people who worked for 12 hours. And you're not surprised, are you? Those people that worked 12 hours are ticked off. The master says to them, it's my money, isn't it? I mean, it's my farm. I can be as generous and do what I want with what I have, can't I? Do you begrudge my kindness? Well, yes. They begrudge his kindness very much. And we love that story, don't we? We love to tell that story because it means what we always hoped is true. There's still time. I mean, big stinking deal. If you don't have your life right with Jesus Christ today, don't worry about it. So what if you're going down the wrong road? The Father waits. Don't worry. You can still come to work at the last hour and you get as much grace as everybody else. There's only one problem with that. There's only one teeny-weeny little problem. And that is, those aren't the only two stories that Jesus told. You see, the Bible is bigger than our favorite parts. A group of girls are invited to a wedding party. They mean to get oil for their lamps, but it was first one thing and then the other. Anyway, it could be hours before the wedding guests are called. There's always plenty of time. Suddenly, the invitation is given, come to the party. But the oil in their lamps is gone. Well, no problem. It's not a big deal. They can just go get some more oil, and they'll show up a little late for the party. So they go and get oil for their lamps. They show up. The door is shut. But it's not a big deal. They just knock on the door. But nobody comes to the door. They can hear music on the other side of the door, and they knock harder. But the door is shut. As Jesus is the one who tells the story, they knock until their knuckles are bloody. But nobody comes to the door. You see, the invitation is gone. The door is shut. There's no coming late, no second chances. Then Jesus says, therefore, Keep watch, because you do not know the day or the hour. We don't like that story as much, do we? In our text that was read earlier this morning, it says, when you see the fig tree blooming, you don't have to look at your watch to know what time it is. Noah knew the time. When Noah built the ark, his neighbors, they ate and drank at backyard Bible barbecues. They looked over the fence. They watched him feverishly pounding away at the ark. They laughed at him. They said, what's wrong with that crazy old man? They made fun of him. They yelled over the fence, hey, Noah, don't you know what time it is? It's Miller time. That's what time it is. It's 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. Chill out. Chillax. Come on and join the party. Noah just kept on working. Unfortunately, for the crowd, as the clouds were gathering dark all around, they had no idea that what was coming was going to do more than just spoil their backyard barbecue. Paul says in 1 Thessalonians 5, 1 through 2, for you know very well that the day of the Lord will come, and it will come like a thief in the night, while people are saying and listening to podcasts of other people saying peace and safety. Destruction will come on them suddenly as labor pains on a pregnant woman, and they will not escape. You know, thieves don't send out engraved announcements to tell you that they're going to be making their middle of the night visit. You do remember, don't you, if you've had a child, or you'll learn it someday, that when babies come, they don't send an announcement out in advance and tell you what hour it's going to be. Man, they just show up suddenly, surprisingly. Jesus says that's exactly the way it's going to be whenever he returns. You see, the Bible, it has a different view of time than that of the Greeks, the cyclical, where things always come around, where there's always another chance. The Bible's view of history is like a straight line with a very definite beginning and a very definite ending. It's going someplace. It begins with Genesis 1, with the creation of the world, and it ends in Revelation with the second coming of Jesus Christ. Therefore, someday, there won't be a tomorrow. Someday, there will be no second chances. In between Genesis and Revelation, the invitation is given. The door is open. God's grace is available to everyone on earth. After Revelation, the door is shut. The invitation is void. Judgment is substituted for grace, and opportunities are over. Of course, the truth is we don't have to wait until Revelation for that time of no more opportunities to come. The writer of Hebrews says it is appointed for a man or a woman once to die, and then comes the judgment. Every person in this place of worship, and frankly, every person that's not in this place of worship, is one day going to meet God face to face. We can like that, or we can not like it, but we don't get a chance to vote on it. We'll either meet Jesus when he comes, or we'll meet him when we go. And every one of us is going to be caught by the suddenness of it, by the surprise of it. Doesn't mean that everyone is going to be ill-prepared, but it certainly does mean that we'll all be surprised. Revelation tells us that those whose names are written in the Lamb's book of life, have committed their life to Jesus Christ, will enter into heaven for all eternity. Those whose names are not written in the Lamb's book of life will be thrown into the eternal lake of fire. There will be no debating, no second chances. The jig is up, the deal is done. Paul says in 2 Timothy chapter 3, in the last days, people will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, without love, unforgiving, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not lovers of the good, treacherous, rash, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. What time is it in our country? What time is it in our world? It may be later than we think. I do know this for a fact, that if Christ were to appear this afternoon, he wouldn't need to make any apologies. because the signs are all there. How often do we need to listen to the widow who wants to tell us, if you have something to say to someone, say it now. If there's someone you need to tell that you love, don't wait until tomorrow. How often do we need to listen to her say, if you need to tell somebody that they're special, that they mean something to you, don't wait. Do it now, because the opportunity won't always be there. What time is it? I'm really not trying to frighten you. I just want you to think, isn't it time that you committed your life to those things that really do matter and not wasted on the things that really don't count for anything? I mean, isn't it time that if you've not committed your life to Jesus Christ, isn't it time to do that? If you've not made a firm commitment of your life to follow Christ, isn't it time? And if you have, students, all of us, isn't it time that you shared with your friends about the importance that Christ is in your life? Isn't it time to do that? James 4:14 says, "What is your life? You're a mist that appears for a little while and then it vanishes." Psalm 103 verses 15 and 16 says, "We're like grass that flourishes, the wind blows and it's no more." Psalm 90 verse 12 says, "Teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom." What time is it? Stop looking at your watch and look inside your heart. And you don't have to wait for me. You don't have to wait for anyone. This morning, right now, you could commit your life to Christ this very moment. You could surrender your life to His will. Just as I'm speaking, you could do that. Come to the Connection Center afterwards. Share that with someone. That's important. But you could do that now. Jesus said at that time, "The Son of Man will appear in the sky, and all the nations of the earth will mourn. They will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of the sky with power and great glory. And He will send His angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather His elect from the four winds, from one end of the heavens to the other. 2 men will be in the field, and one will be taken away and the other left. 2 women will be grinding with a handmill. One will be taken and the other left. One day God will separate the sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on His right," Jesus said, "and the goats on His left. To the sheep He will say, 'Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world.' To the goats He will say, 'Depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels.'" One day, the gavel will go down. The ticking clock will go silent. The little up and down electronic thing on the monitor will just go flat. Someday, there will be no tomorrow. It will just be over. Now, you may not believe that because you've never seen anything like it in your whole life, not even in a sermon. There's always a second chance. There's always another opportunity to receive Jesus. There's still time. There's always next Sunday. Always one more chance. Most of us don't seem to understand that one day the obese lady really is going to sing. And if you've not given your life to Jesus Christ and you've not followed Him, Jesus says that the opportunity will be over, that the door will be shut, there will be no more opportunities. It will just be finale, the end. Somebody will be right in the middle of a sentence.